Before I dive in, I'll just start by saying that in Australia, we do what's called an acknowledgement of country. And what that means is that because a few hundred years ago, we had settlers come to Australia and they took the land from the Indigenous people here. So the practice is that when we are presenting, we acknowledge who the traditional owners of the land that we're sitting on are. And so I want to acknowledge that I am living and working and raising my family on Dharawal country. And I was also raised on Dharawal country myself. And I want to just acknowledge all of the elders, past, present, and emerging in those communities. In Australian, in our Indigenous practice, they call their death practice sorry business when they look after their dead. And so I really want to acknowledge all of the wisdom that has happened in all of that sorry business on this country and around Australia as well. I have the great privilege of being able to work with some Indigenous people within our community in helping them care for their dead. And it's a really incredible, profound thing. And I think they get it so right. So that's my acknowledgement to country. It's really great seeing where all of you are from because I think there's a lot of stories of Indigenous communities all throughout those different nations as well. So it sort of lands in their own ways. But that's where I am at the moment. I thought I'd do a little bit of housekeeping for everyone. Thank you so much for those of you that have your cameras on. I always find it so much easier talking to people than a screen. So I really love the fact that I can see your faces. If you don't have your camera on and you feel confident enough to, please pop them on. If you're not comfortable with that, though, that's absolutely fine because I firmly believe that we all just do what we feel like we need to do. And so that means that when we're listening to presentations like these, we laugh when we need to laugh, we cry when we need to cry, and it just is what it is. So, I welcome all that comes with all of that. And I trust that all of you will look after yourselves during this session as well, what your own capacities are. I just want to also say that I'm recording this session. So if anyone's uncomfortable with that, they can turn their cameras off or send a message in the chat to Lucy, our mod, who can deal with that with you. And I thought I'd just run through a little bit of what to expect through this session as well for you. I'm going to be talking about how we empower communities in bereavement, what that model looks like. Not only why it's important, but also the practical of how to do it, because it's so simple, actually. It's just you sort of need to hear the concept and then you'll have it, really. From there, I'll also talk about what it looks like caring for our dead, why it's important, why it's helpful, and what that can actually look like in practice, because a lot of people, if they haven't had that experience, can't even fathom what that might look like. And then at the end, I think my session will probably only go for about half an hour or so. And then I'm going to have a really big window of opportunity for questions because normally people have a lot of questions. Those questions might be about the topic we're talking about. They might be about something else to do with this in general. So I invite all of those and I've allowed space for us to have some really great conversations. So you'll be able to turn your mics on if you want to and have a chat or to type it out and put it on the chat there as well. So as you're going, if you have any questions, just write them down because we'll get to those at the end for you. But before I introduce myself, I mean, Lucy has done that a little bit. My name is Amy Sagar. Hold on, we've got someone wanting to enter the room there. I'll just put that there. My name is Amy Sagar. I've been a funeral director since I was 16 years old. So that's now for me a 16-year career. And I worked in the traditional funeral industry for 8 years, and I wanted to see a change in the funeral industry. And then I had an opportunity to help my local enough community in opening a not-for-profit funeral service, which was value aligned to what I felt that funerals should be like. So from there, I volunteered on the project for 2 years, and then we opened Tender Funerals. So Tender Funerals is a not-for-profit community-based funeral service. So we believe that anyone should have access to a good funeral, regardless of what your financial status is. And everyone's deserving of that, regardless of what their financial status is. We are not just for poor people. We are for everyone because everyone deserves that. And we believe that it shouldn't cost a lot of money. But what we have found that the people who we do serve say, you know, this was worth more than what you've charged us. So we're actually going to pay you more. And then that becomes part of the model of how we then end up supporting people on the lower end because we pull money from that benevolent pool and contribute it to their funerals so that they can still have equal access to the same sort of death practice, whatever that looks like for them. So that's a little bit about me. That's a brief introduction to tender funerals. As you heard, in 2022, we were on Australian Story, which is a program that runs here in Australia. And it was a half-hour program. It's available on YouTube if you want to see it. But this was the trailer that played to give you a little snapshot of it and what I'm about and what we're about. As you can see, it's a screen recording off my phone. But it sort of captures it. So I think it's a really nice way for you to start this session. So I might ask Lucy to play that for me now.
If it could happen in Port Kembla, then it can happen anywhere in Australia.
Doing death differently.
I want to see the funeral industry change. I suppose most people don't know that they could have a funeral in their backyard.
There was no way my husband was getting in the back of hers.
Funerals are one-off events and they can be not good or they can be absolutely transformational.
That's a revolution and that is unstoppable.
Australian Story, Monday at 8 on ABC TV and ABC iView.
Thank you. So it's very brief, but I think it helps to have those visuals on what we're talking about here when we're talking about community-based funerals. Sometimes they look like really traditional funerals that we expect in the movies, and sometimes they look like incredibly unique events and happenings. And it's really cool. I was also very pregnant in the filming of that. So that's one of my children that are off at the park at the moment, so I can do this presentation in silence, which is lovely. So maybe I might jump in. What I want to speak about first is we've touched on very briefly what community funerals are, but we haven't talked about why they're important. So I'll start there because when we look at what a funeral that's owned by their community is, that really looks like the people who are attending the funeral and who knew the person who died feeling a sense of ownership and participation in the funeral ceremony. And this has a lot of added on benefits because instead of going to something, I know some of the death cultures in some of the countries that you're coming from. To give you context to Australian death culture, and I'm going to talk about your Anglo-Saxon white people because we make up the majority here, although we do have a very multicultural community. But the Anglo-Saxon community here are very big in their death denial. They don't want to talk about death. They don't have a solid practice in what to do. A few generations ago, we did look after our dead, and that's been phased out. So here in Australia, most people have never seen a body before. They likely will not view the person before they have a funeral and then their body is disposed of. So what will happen is they will, on the majority, die in a hospital, not be seen again by their people. The funeral director will handle the care of the body, arrange the funeral, and the family will choose things like music and which coffin, and then they attend, and the celebrant or clergy person will say the content of the ceremony. So it's quite far removed from the process of the ceremony. So they're more like an observer than a participant of it. What we say is, here's an opportunity to participate. And this is what opportunities to participate look like, and this is why that can be helpful. When I was a funeral director in the traditional industry, so our death culture is, kind of perpetuated by our funeral industry as well. We really hand on heart thought we were helping people. We just wanted to do what we thought was helping them and what they believed was us helping them. So I worked with families in that traditional space, and at the end of the funeral, they would turn to me and they would say, "Thank you so much, Amy. We don't know how we would have done that without you." And that was really that felt really nice to know that I was helping people. But when we go to community funerals, our model is that if we do everything for that family, they don't develop their muscle of capacity in bereavement. So they end up handing everything to us, and we do everything, and they haven't learnt as a community how to do that. And then when the funeral director leaves at the end, they buckle because their main support person has just left. But there's this opportunity where if we teach a community how to be empowered in bereavement, then they will carry on without us. And when we leave, they won't notice. And so when we're doing tender funerals, our founder Jenny and I, when we started, it was just her and I. And at the end of the funerals, those families would just turn around and leave. They're like, "Bye," and they'd be like, "We did it." And then we would be like, "We did it," because they didn't need us. They felt enough of an ownership that they didn't need to say, like, "You did that." They got to have that moment for themselves where they're like, "We did that. We laid them to rest." So when we look at how we achieve that, it's actually an incredibly simple process. It's just not a commonly done process. But the process itself not only supports bereavement, but it teaches the whole community at the same time what to do in the future. It looks as simple as when I arrange a funeral, I sit with a family, and as we make our decisions, there's often a to-do list that comes with it. So it's just a pen and paper, and we write our to-do list. And that to-do list might look like, oh, okay, someone has to call the florist and book the flowers. Someone has to pick up clothing and drop it into the funeral home. Someone has to print a photo or buy a photo frame for the photo to go in. Someone might have to, did I say sandwiches for a week? There's all sorts of things that can happen. And then often either the funeral director does it or they feel a sense of responsibility to power through the list. And for some people, that's great. But for some people, that's incredibly challenging. And then we say to those people when we meet them, "Do you know who your community are?" And most of the time they will say no, because people don't call their friends their community. That's not in their language normally. And so we say first, we help them identify who their community is. And we say, your community are all of the people who've sent you a message to say, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Let me know if there's anything I can do," which is very commonly said, and also very usually not helpful because people don't know what to do, what that means, what are they willing to do, really? But they appreciate the gesture. So we help by saying, "Look, anyone who said that, let me know if there's anything I can do." As your community saying, "I identify as your community and I chew my right arm off right now to make you feel that little bit better because I'm feeling incredibly helpless watching you be upset by this. And I'd love to help, but I don't know how." And so then we change the language of asking for help, and we say, "You know what would be really amazing is if you sent that list to those people, because that's like giving them a gift. And that gift is the opportunity to do something to help, because most people would give their right arm to help right now, but they don't know how to. They don't know what you need. So if you extend that opportunity to them, not only will it benefit you, but they will also feel incredibly relieved to have something that they can do." But it goes further than that. It opens a conversation. So we know a lot in bereavement, people are afraid of saying the wrong thing. They don't want to upset the person and don't know what to say. So sometimes they say nothing at all for fear of saying the wrong thing. But what if they had a conversation about dog food? If they had a conversation about what sort of milk does your household drink? What size photo frame do you need picked up from Officeworks or whatever your stationery store is overseas? When we change the lens to those sorts of conversations, what happens is our community go, "Oh, that's still Amy. Like she's sad sometimes, but she's not sad the whole time. And I had a conversation with her and it felt comfortable and I felt comfortable talking to her. So I don't have to avoid talking to her because I'm fearful of that, because we've already done that. We've broken that ice. And it means that next time they see that person, be it at the funeral or after, they have a starting point. They can say, is this the right photo? Like, tell me if this is the right thing. They might say, hey, I was just at the shops and thinking about you. Do you need any more specialized milk for your cat that has dietary requirements? Like, they have an in, and it means that there's an in for your community to have contact, communication, conversation with you so that people are well supported. And the people on the outside are feeling connected to you because they have a way of engaging without, if they don't know any other way to engage. So it's really helpful that way. But it continues. When we get to the funeral, instead of at the funeral then being like, that was a really nice funeral, they go, I did that. See those flowers? I went and picked those up. I was able to do that. And they have a little bit of pride in them. And so they have an emotional stake in it, not just saying goodbye. There is something that has engaged them in a way that gives them a sense of ownership of that ceremony or that process that's happened. That's incredibly powerful and incredibly helpful for people. When it goes to after the funeral, those connections stay. Not only do those connections stay and that person is supported, but when the outer community experience another bereavement in their community, they go, oh, I know what to do. Like last time I just got milk and it was great having that thing that I could do. Or last time I remember they sent a whole list and I got to choose from the list what was in my capacity of support that I could offer at the time. Maybe I just say to them, hey, do you want to put together a list and we'll all choose from there what we can do. So what we're doing is we are teaching communities how to approach bereavement, how to approach funeral ceremonies, how to be supported, and how to ask for support. When that person is supported by all of the people around them, it means that when we, the funeral director, leave, they don't buckle because their people are there. They catch them, they keep walking along together. But if we don't take that opportunity to empower that community, teach them what to do and how to do it, then we leave and we leave people without having built that muscle as they go. And that's not just the immediate family, it's everyone, it's the extended community and all. People are often afraid to ask for help, but then once they've had the opportunity to receive it in a way that's not like poor you, but more like let's create this together and let's have this joint community experience of like, this is how I would love to support you in bereavement. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to do the same for me. It evens the playing field. It makes it so much more accessible for people. And truly that conversation when I'm arranging a funeral takes about 5 minutes. It's making a list, flipping it from it being asking for help to being like, I have a gift to offer all of my people. There will be people that it doesn't work for, but that's fine because they just won't choose something off the list, right? And they don't have to. That's fine. It's a really helpful and simple model, and it's how we approach funerals. When we look at what it means to be hands-on in engaging in a funeral and engaging in the ceremony, a lot of that conversation also comes back to the body. So that comes into the next half of what I'm going to present about today. Does anyone have any questions or any elaboration they would like on that topic before I move on to the next topic? I know I said I'd do questions at the end, but I feel like I smashed through that one pretty quick. So if anyone had questions, I'll give them a little chance. Otherwise, I'll move on to my next topic for you. Okay, we're good. Great. Excellent. So now we segue. And the segue is to, it's still in part participating in the ceremonial practices, but this is about the body itself. So I'll talk about a few levels of it. Often I'm talking about the immediate family members of the person. But just imagine when I'm saying that, that term is interchangeable to mean whoever is close to that person. It doesn't have to be blood. It's whoever is appropriate at that person, and they will know themselves who that person is. So if I died, it'd probably be my sister, probably be my mum. But when we talk about the body, there is an enormous gift that can come from having interactions with the body after someone's died. And I think the really good way to look at it is a bit how I did the housekeeping, which is like everyone, you do what you need to do and you determine your own capacity in this. So if they feel strongly that they do not want to see the body, then they should not see the body. But if they feel strongly that they do want to see the body, then they should see the body. It's truly as simple as that. And it goes for children as well. Because if you force people to do something that they don't want to do, either engage with it or not have the opportunity to engage with it, that's where those traumatic experiences come from for a lot of people. And we often hear that when we talk about viewings, we have families say to us a lot, oh, you know, when my father died, I was a child and I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. And they're an adult, and that's still how they think about death now as an adult. It's like, I wasn't allowed to see my father's body. And so what happens when we care for our dead is we learn how to do death. So it's a teaching opportunity, and we teach it in every way. We just don't realize because it's in our practice. I can see we've got a question there. Hold on one sec. Do we have any sort of template for the list that gets passed out? So for example, no, I don't have a template. Normally it's really organic. Like you just ask yourself, what do I need right now? And then whatever you need right now is what you create the list out of. So it's like, oh God, my cat can't eat whatever food, and I really don't have it in me to go to the shop right now to have to buy freaking cat food. So you just put on the list, can someone go to the pet shop and buy cat food? And like, but everyone's needs are going to be unique. So it can't be generic. I think it's just like, what am I being asked to do for the funeral by the funeral director? And what of that can I give to someone else to do? And what of that is important for me to do? So if there are parts of it that will be important for them, like maybe choosing the clothes, but is it important for them to drive the clothes to the funeral home, or can they outsource that task? So it's like, what am I willing to outsource here, and what outsourcing would best support me right now? And then that's how you create your list. And sometimes it's really formal tasks, sometimes it's very informal and almost mundane. But if you don't feel like doing it, put it on the list because someone else will, and they'll be really grateful to have the opportunity to have a weird, mundane little task instead of some big arduous task. So it all goes on the list. Okay, so engaging with the body. Another question, hold on. Is there an expectation in the community that will collect the cat food as well as to pay for the cat food? How does that work? Oh, I mean, I think that's getting into the nitty-gritty. Personally, I wouldn't expect people to pay for cat food, but people can just determine that on their own. Like they're grown-ups, they can have a conversation about it. So we're not micromanaging it. It's just your best friend's husband died, and you go to your best friend, hey, what do you need right now? Like what's hard right now? And I can just tick off something from your list. And they go, oh, you know what? I really need cat food and I don't feel like going to the shops. And that's where they go, oh yeah, just transfer me the money and I'm happy to go today for you. Like it's not a formal process. It's a process that you do with your people. And when you're having a process with your people, normally that stuff happens very organically. If you were having that process with a stranger, that might be a little bit different. But for me, like I would put it out on their social media. Hey guys, this happened. This is hard. Here's a list of things. And on the bottom of the list, I just make the last task nothing at all. Just understanding that I might not reply to messages really fast right now would be great. That would be, if you could do that for me, that would be wonderful. So there's also like the opt out of like, it's cool if you don't do it. But if you're wanting to do something, here's the list. And message me and we'll organize it kind of thing. So it is a very informal process. And I'm sure that there are people out there that would be like organization whizzes that would formalize that, but that's their prerogative to do that if they want to, or if you're supporting your community, you might want to develop your own model around that because you'll know what your community needs. In Australia, our community don't need that, but every community has different needs. And so they will all adapt their own versions of what their own community needs. I think that addressed those questions. Yep. I hope. keep them coming if they come in. So when we're talking about what happens when we see a body of the person that we care about, I'll start by saying what our cultural norm is Australia. I touched on it earlier. And then it'll give you some context into what the difference is when you have this model. So as I said, in Australia, we don't see the body. We don't talk about it much. Our funeral might go for about half an hour, and then we have sandwiches, and then we never talk about it again. It's just like uncomfortable for most people. What we find for people is that in the traditional funeral industry, when I was a funeral director there, it was not normal for the community to care for the body. It was very much expected that that would be the role of the funeral director, unless there was specific cultural requirements for it. So our multicultural community, they do it a lot. This is not new information to them. They're probably like, why is this person having a beginner session on caring for bodies? This is what we always do. But in our community, it's not the norm. And as a young woman, when I entered that industry, I believed them that people couldn't handle being able to see their people. They couldn't handle being able to wash them. And that was that was the mortician's role. But then I worked with some people in the Islander community. And in the Islander community, they do care for their dead. And normally the women will come in and wash and dress the body.
I think we have lost
I'm back.
Amy.
Don't know what happened there. My internet's playing up today, of course. The Islander community, they do wash and dress their body. But not only do they do that, they do it well. They knew what they were doing. They had grace about them. And I think that in my experience, the woman that I watched them dress, she was a heavier set woman. And her community were strong, heavy set women. And they just graced their way through caring for her in an environment where I would have struggled on my own as a mortician. And I just was so schooled by that because I had always been taught that people didn't have the capacity to do that. And I just watched these people swan their way through it without needing me. And I was like, oh, I really thought that'd go differently. I was in awe of it. And then the more I saw of communities that had that in their practice, those women grew up doing that. There were children running around while we were doing this. It was their norm. And it was because it was not taboo and it was safe and it was matter of fact, but it was also beautiful. And it was the act of honoring that person, of caring for them. And it was normal. And it completely changed the way that I looked at mortuary care and caring for the dead. Now, I wasn't allowed to offer this to every person who came and had a funeral with that funeral home. I wasn't allowed to. We weren't equipped for it. They didn't believe that people had the capacity for it. And I begged to differ. And so when I saw this opportunity for tender funerals, part of what they believed was death being transparent and people having access to their dead because it can look like this. And I was like, yes, this is what our community needs. They need a safe place to feel like they're allowed to because they think that they're not even allowed to see the person or not even allowed to touch them. That legally, the deceased legally belongs to the family and the family think that they're not allowed to touch them. So that's where we are in our culture. So in our funeral home, we have conversations with people that look a bit different. So we built our mortuary and we built it as a public space. So we built it so that anyone is welcome in our mortuary. We developed our mortuary practice to look the same, whether family members were present or not. It's the same thing that happens. And it's a ceremonial practice, just as it is a practical practice as well. And we made it beautiful. Like most mortuaries are really dingy. And so we have plants in our mortuary and we have natural sunlight coming in and we have art. And like it's a beautiful place to be because it's a deeply sacred space that we use. And the act of caring for a body is a deeply sacred act. But why? Why is that a deeply sacred act? And the reason is because it's a transformational process. And it's transformational for the people who engage in it. And it's a rite of passage. It's a rite of passage for the dead, and it's a rite of passage for the bereaved. It's where we learn about death and where we learn about what happens when someone dies, what happens to our bodies, what happens to our communities. And it's normalizing things. So when we have these funerals where we don't talk about it, we don't engage with the body, we go to the ceremony for half an hour, what we see is people usually struggle when they first see the coffin. It's a very highly emotional time for valid, genuine reasons. But for a lot of people, that's the first tangible moment where it's undeniable that that person has died. Like, oh my God, this is real. They died. Like they're right there. They're really gone. And then they're supposed to get themselves to a point within 20 to 30 minutes where they have to accept that and then be able to let go of the body to be disposed of at the end. So in the end of it, the body will be cremated or buried, which is called the disposal of the body. And when someone hasn't yet accepted that the person has died, how on earth are they going to get to the point at the end of the funeral where they feel ready to let them go? It's very difficult. And this is where having that opportunity to engage with our dead is so valuable. Because what happens is when we see them before the funeral, be it caring for their body or having a viewing, whether it's laid out as if they're in a bed or in the coffin, they're meeting them. They're meeting their death for the first time. And they're going, wow, yeah, this is real. And it's difficult. It is a difficult and emotional thing, but it's doable. And we can do hard things. They're just hard. That's all. And so what's happening is that then they're saying, oh, I see you. This is what dead means. You're not breathing. You feel different. You feel cold. And we're so wired, when we shake someone's hand normally in life, we don't think to ourselves, what temperature is their hand going to be? We don't think about it. We just shake their hand and it feels normal. We don't even have to think about what it was afterwards. And for people who've lost someone, they're still expecting that when they lay their hands on them, to not even think about what that will feel like. But then when they do lay their hands on them, they're really, really cold. They're like the temperature of your milk when you get it out of the fridge. And they may have condensation on them like your milk does when you get the jug out of the fridge. And it's striking for people because it's the first time that their body has the chance to catch up with what their mind knows. Their body is like, oh, this is what death is. They're gone. And often what we imagine death to be, for the visual, what we imagine is so much worse than reality majority of the time. And so they're comprehending that they might look slightly different, but they also look very much the same. And they might look really peaceful. And people are often struck by that as well. So we're having this process where people are having this learning engagement that really can't be spoken and only experienced. And it's transformational. People feel a sense of pride and accomplishment at the end of it. And ownership of like, I did that. And then what we find is when they come to the day of the funeral, that funeral process is a lot easier for them. And the reason being is that they have already done that part. where they say like, oh, wow, they're really dead. And now they're at the part where they're like, I can see that their body has changed and we need to lay them to rest. I can see that that's not them in the living, breathing version of them that I knew them to be. And so I can see that there are changes happening to their body and that we will need to let them go because those changes will keep happening. And that's the early signs of decomposition, which sounds really dramatic, but is actually very slight in reality. But because we can see those, we can comprehend that we have to dispose of that body. And we have to come to a point where we're going to let go and say, it's time for them to go. And that's really part of the job of the funeral ceremony, is to get people to that point where they can say goodbye, goodbye to your body. And there are many, many things that we do in funerals, and people have different purposes for their ceremonies. It might be a religious purpose to get their soul into heaven. It might be a legacy purpose to honor who they were in life and how we'll remember them. It might be to acknowledge how we feel about them dying and our sorrow, or perhaps for some people, joy that they have died. And also to get them to a point where they can dispose of the body. And a good celebrant can help understand what purpose you're trying to achieve in a ceremony and craft a ceremony that suits that need for them. But this is the rite of passage work for people, because they've got to get to that point where they say, okay, it's time to let go of the body. And if we can get people to that point before the ceremony, then that can be quite an empowering thing for them to be able to say, I am deciding it's time for them to go, rather than my husband's body had to be cremated and I wasn't ready. Very different exchanges, very different experiences of death. And part of how we get people there is empowering them with choice. They might say, under no circumstances do I want to see his body. And you know what? That's an empowered person making a decision for them. That's a very different engagement to, I was not allowed to see my husband's body. I chose not to see my husband's body. Very different stories that they carry forward after that. So it's just a process of saying to people, hey, I believe that you have capacity to determine what your own capability is. And we're going to create a space where we're going to offer all of that to you, and you choose what you do and don't want to do. We have a model of continual offering, which means that people might change their mind. When the death first happens, they might not be able to at all comprehend washing and dressing that person. But if we tell them early on that that's an opportunity that they can choose to do, if they've never thought about it, their default no might set in, and that's fine. And then in a few days' time, as they process what's happened, they might change their mind and they might decide to. We see that a lot. And we see what happens in those people's processes when they do engage in it, and they have profound experiences because they haven't been forced to, they haven't been not allowed to, they've just been allowed to decide where they're at each step and do that in a supported way. It's so helpful and it's so important. And it's also really, really simple. So what does this look like in practice? In practice, in our mortuary, this looks like a body who has arrived to us either wearing the clothes that they died in, with no clothing at all, or wearing a hospital gown. We lay them out with a sheet underneath them, just a normal bed sheet, and a pillow under their head. So that's the first thing we do when they arrive in our care, because they're people. We treat them like people. And we have them wrapped up when they're in our care. But when we do the washing and dressing, we just unwrap them so it looks like they're laying in a bed with the sheet underneath them. And we might just put another bed sheet over the top of them if what they're wearing doesn't look very nice. If they're not wearing clothes, or if they're not wearing undergarments under their clothes, we just put a modesty cloth over them, which is sort of like the size of a tea towel. And it means that we're covering their genitals because it gives them a bit of their humanity. Like we're modest people normally. And a lot of people have never seen their father naked and don't want to see him naked for the first time when we're doing this. And so we can just preserve that dignity and say, hey, you know what? No one has to see them naked to do this. We'll just have a modesty cloth over them. And then we dress them over, like you pull up the underwear, tucking in the modesty cloth. And then once they're covered by the underwear, you can pull it out after. So it's actually so simple, but it's so comforting for people, and it's a respectful thing to do for the dead. Unless they were a nudist, in which case, toss the modesty cloth. We have that too. Some people love their naked bodies and go for it. We don't mind. It's not up to us. But we just give people those choices. And we just lay out some towels, a bowl of nice warm water. We say to people, you can choose an essential oil from the selection that we have here. And we just put it, you always mix a bit of soap in the water so the oils mix with the water instead of floating on the top. And then we have washcloths and we give them a sponge bath. So we use nice warm water because their bodies are so cold. And so on a sensory experience as the person doing that, that's really striking. So we always say, here's like nice, warm, nurturing, warm washcloths. And as that cloth cools down, we're going to pass you a fresh one so that you're having a warmer experience in your body as well. Then we just get a towel and dry them. And then we dress them. And that just looks like gently rolling the person side to side to shimmy their pants up under their bum or their shirt down the rest of the way. Similar to how you dress a toddler. You know how you like put their arms first and then you say, do the Superman, and you pull it all the rest of the way down. That's how we dress the dead. And so when we work with people, we always explain to them that that's what this will look like. We show them the room before the time. And I think hopefully that helps normalize what that process is, because for some people it's unconceivable what to even imagine caring for your dead would look like. So that's why I offer that there today. So I've spoken about how we empower our community, how we identify our community, why that's important. I've spoken about why it can be so helpful to have access to our dead and what it can look like caring for them. I will say that in Australia, we can have our bodies at home. There are certain legalities, but because you're an international audience, I'm not going to dive too deeply into that. But if there's any Aussies here that want to know, you can hit me up. I think we're up to question time now. I know that there were some coming through in the chat, but I wanted to present that part first. So what do we have in the chat here? Let me see. Okay, so I've got the question, what percentage of people are now viewing and or dressing their people? Is it increasing? I didn't know it was a thing when my mum died 17 years ago, and I feel it was a missed opportunity. Oh, Annie, that's the hard part about learning this, isn't it? Because a lot of people are like, I wish I knew that. And that's the great shame, is that people aren't just informed or empowered at the time, and to learn afterwards is a difficult thing. So I'm sorry that you're learning that now. To answer your question, the percentage of people that do it at tender is almost half of the families that we see choose to care for their dead, which is massive. For us, that's God, I can't even remember our recent odds of how many funerals we're doing a year, but it's about half. When I was in the traditional industry, I could count on one hand how many I would do in a year, and they had to have it in their cultural practice and advocate for being able to do it because we weren't allowed to offer it to them. So the difference here is just saying, did you know you're allowed to, and do you want to? That's the difference. And people do want to, they just don't realize that they want to because they've never heard of it. So why would you think of it? And that's part of culture change. As the more people who do that, the more people that learn what that can be like, and then their community hear about it from them, culture change happens. Maylee said, I had the honor of washing and dressing my mum and then pushing the button to send her into the crematory retort a few days later. It was an honor I will never forget, and an honor to seek for others as a funeral director. That is so beautiful. I love when people do that, but getting to press the button, what an empowering experience. Like, what a sense of ownership you have over that process and the decisions that come with that. Thank you for sharing that. Holly, I don't know where you are to know if that's whether that's available for you or not. Maybe it is, and maybe you just don't know it. Jackie's question, guiding families to wash their person, are they on a cooling plate? If they're in our mortuary, they're not on a cooling plate. This must be an Aussie, I assume, but maybe not. That was the part that I wasn't going to go too in deep with for our international audience, but we have what's called a cool plate or a cold bed. It's a refrigerated metal tray and it sits at -15 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's below freezing point, well below freezing point. And in Australia, it means that you can keep your body at home for up to 5 days without needing to be embalmed. And it makes it legally possible, but also slows down the process of decomposition in the body. So it's really helpful. When you're working in the Australian funeral industry, in New South Wales, so where our law is determined by state. I'm in New South Wales, and our Health Act states that the body can only be out of refrigeration for up to 8 hours without being embalmed. So because they're only out of refrigeration for a few hours when we're doing a family washing and dressing in our mortuary, which is majority of the time, then no, they're not on a cool plate and they're not embalmed. But if they were doing it at home, then yes, they would be on a cool plate, to answer that question. Okay, and then the next one, what do you do for First Nations funerals? Oh, it's different for each community. So in Australia, our First Nations people are made up of many, many, many tribes, hundreds of them. And each tribe has a different practice. So there are commonalities through them, but depending on the location of them is where it's different. And so when I work with our Indigenous community, I normally ask them what their country is, which means their Indigenous country. So the locals here would say, my country is Dharawal country. And that's not referring to the country Australia. It's saying which piece of land in Australia is where your tribe comes from and what is their practice. And their social system is normally set up where they have elders, and their elders are the knowledge holders and the teachers. And then they can often guide their community through those processes. So I can speak in very general terms, but when I work with Indigenous families, I never talk to them about what their practice is. I ask them. I say, what is your community's practice? What is your family's practice? What country are you from? What do they do in your country? And if they don't know, my job is to help them find their elders, not as a white person to teach them what their Indigenous practice is, unless they can't find their elders and that's what they're seeking. But that's certainly not my first approach. So I just wanted to preface that before I talk about what their practice is, because it's not my knowledge. It's varied knowledge. Commonly, the body is returned to country that they were born on, but not always. Commonly, they are buried, but sometimes they're cremated. And commonly, when they're buried on country. The issue in Australia with that is that burial is incredibly expensive. It costs them thousands of dollars just to purchase a plot, let alone the rest of the funeral expenses, which is not accessible to all of our Indigenous people. So that's a pretty loaded thing in itself. The different families that I've worked with will do a smoking ceremony before entering the ceremony space. And not only will all of the people pass through it, but the coffin will pass through the smoke as well. And the reason they're doing that is they are cleansing any spirits from themselves or spirits that may attract to them while they're doing sorry business, which is the practice of ritual death care if they're dead. Sometimes the person will be dressed in their favorite football jersey. Sometimes the Indigenous person may have become a Catholic and they have a full Catholic mass. Sometimes they will do it with a celebrant or themselves, and they will have didgeridoo players, they will have dancers, they will have all of those different things. I think what's important to note is that in Australia, our Indigenous people were stolen for many, many generations and not allowed to practice their cultural practices, which means that many of them are now no longer in touch with what their cultural practice is, which is why we see such variations of it as well, and why we see variations of their Indigenous practice that actually have nothing to do with even Indigenous religion, like having a Catholic mass. That's very different to going to the Dreamtime. But because for generations they were probably stolen and then brought into a Catholic mission or those sorts of things, they've lost touch with what their actual tradition is, and they have a new version of that. So it's very complicated. What we tend to do is we say to families, do you want them to have a bit of country with them before they're buried? So we go and we rip down branches of our native gum leaves and our eucalyptus trees, because eucalyptus is very cleansing. That's what they use in their smoking ceremonies as well. So what we have started offering for them is just to say, hey, if you just want a bit of country with them right now, until we get to the point of funeral ceremony, we can just go and do that, and we'll put that in with them while they're with us, and we can line the bottom of their coffin with it so that they have some with them at the time as well. So that's what we've started doing, but it's so different for every community around Australia, as is many of their practices. So let me go to the next questions. We have about 10 minutes left. Okay, that sounds like such a lovely experience that you were offering. It sounds so warm and an opportunity for closure. Whereas here in the US, the process can be so cold, so expensive, and removed for the loved ones. The process in the US is very similar to the process in Australia, and that's the culture we're trying to change. So our Anglos have a very similar experience to the US, except in the US, embalming is a lot more common. And what you call natural burial, we would call normal burial, and what we call normal burial is another level again. Not normal burial, natural burial. What we call natural burial is another level again, because in America, you line your crypts with cement and you have your graves are crypts. But in Australia, we just dig a hole in the dirt and place a coffin into it. And we don't worry about all the waterproofing stuff that seems, from what I see of the US death culture, is like, buy this solid metal coffin and water will never touch a person's body. And, it seems very commercialized. But I mean, the whole point really is our bodies decompose and return to earth, depending on what your beliefs are. Okay, so question, how do you proceed with injured bodies? I proceed by consulting with the family and asking them what they want. Do they want to see their person? Do they want to care for their person? And if they do, then my job is to not make them look like it never happened. My job is to manage families' expectations to be realistic as possible so that they are making truly informed decisions as to whether they want to participate in that or not. And so while I do reconstruction and I will manage those injuries and I improve the appearance of them, they still look like they were injured. It's like putting makeup over a black eye. Most of the time you can tell there was a black eye there because you can tell someone's wearing makeup, but you're reducing the visual impact of that black eye. And so that's what a lot of mortuary reconstruction looks like, is really reducing the impact of what's happened, the visual impact of what's happened to their bodies, and then managing people's real expectations to be as realistic as possible. And the way that I do that is I talk through the senses and I titrate the information so they can opt out at any point if they feel like they've heard enough without having been bombarded with too much information. So I say, I'm going to tell you about the color of their skin. The color of their skin is, and then I will explain in great graphic detail of what they will see, because then they will determine whether they want to see that or not. If they're saying that they want to see the person. If they've said, no, I don't want to see them, I don't go to that level of detail. But we are never in the practice of saying no. I've had families who have opted to view their heavily decomposed loved ones, and when they left the room, they thanked us. They said, thank you so much for letting us do that. We needed to do that. And what they saw was really quite confronting, but they were well prepared and chose to do that because it was important to them. And their story will always be, I was allowed to see my person, not my person was decomposed, or I wasn't allowed to see them because they were so decomposed. It was like our funeral director supported us and we got to see them. So it looks different for everyone, and we don't automatically reconstruct people if they have been injured or received traumatic injuries in their death. We give people the choices. Do you want to see them? Do you want us to cover their injuries? Here's what we can and can't do. And you just empower people to make their own choices, and then it's going to meet what their needs are. So there's no one answer for everyone. Everyone's needs are different, so they'll all have their own. Okay. Do you hire out many cool plates? Yes, we do. Peaks and troughs. Like you might have no one hire them for months and then you'll have both of them out at the same time. It's just like so unpredictable. And they're there and whoever needs them can access them. Okay. Why hasn't the tender model grown across Australia? Oh, funny you should ask that. The tender model has grown across Australia. After the Australian Story episode, we had phone calls from all around Australia from people who wanted a tender in their community. So we started in Port Kembla. We now have another site on Mid North Coast, and we have another site in Canberra. And they're each owned by their own communities and run by their own communities. Tender Australia will support them, give them the information and give them the guidelines of the non-negotiables. Like you have to have a mortuary that's public. You have to be a not-for-profit. You have to empower communities. But then those communities will decide what the rest of that looks like. We also now have working groups around Australia of just volunteers who are like, I want that so much that I'm going to volunteer on this project and make it happen in my community. Enter me being chairperson on Western Sydney. I'm that person as well. That I'm like, I want that in my closer community. So I'm going to volunteer on a group and we're all going to raise the money and open a funeral home in our community, which is a tender. So that's what that looks like. There's a lot of information about that on our website. And we have Helen here who is in our Perth working group as well, trying to open a tender there. So our volunteers are amazing.